We are very happy to have with us today Michael López-Alegria. Mike L.A. is an astronaut and test pilot with dual nationality, American and Spanish. He's a veteran of 3 space shuttle missions and 1 mission to the International Space Station. His longest duration mission was 215 days aboard the ISS, and he also has the most EVAs of any NASA astronaut, and he holds the second longest cumulative EVA duration, totaling almost 68 hours in space over 10 separate spacewalks. In 2022, he commanded the first all-private commercial astronaut mission on Axiom 1, going to the ISS for a mission duration of 17 days. And then in 2024, he was the commander of Axiom 3, which lasted 21 days. Overall, he has more than 40 years of experience in aviation and spaceflight, and we are very pleased to have him here today to talk about his experiences, his perspectives on innovation in spaceflight, and his thoughts on what's next. With that, Mike L.A.
Buddy? We on? Can you guys hear me okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nothing yet. 1, 2, 3. I get away from... Okay, good? All right. So, first of all, thanks, Jim, for the introduction, and it's great to be here. I've told some variations of this story quite a few times, but I think it's appropriate today that since the Axiom mission control team was honored with an award, I'm going to talk about private astronaut missions. But first, let me go through a couple things about Axiom and what we're doing beside the astronaut missions. Houston, we have a problem. Good? Okay. So the first thing we're doing, the reason the company was founded, is to build a commercial space station. We aim to be the successor to the International Space Station, at least one of them, on a commercial basis. We all know and love the ISS. It's an amazing laboratory. It's been in orbit for, depending on how you count it, almost 30 years. It's been continuously inhabited for almost 25 years, and it's produced an amazing amount of world-class science, not to mention its lasting legacy, which may be international cooperation, but it's a machine that's going to wear out and it has to come home. And so the obvious replacement, because the 5 agencies that make up the partnership still want to keep sending their astronauts there to a low Earth orbit, that is, to continue the work that they've been doing on the ISS, to have a commercial platform. So our plan now is to do that in several stages. The first module, which is called PPTM, stands for Payload Power and Thermal Module, will be launched to the ISS under an exclusive agreement we have with NASA to be able to attach a module to it. It's obviously easier to launch a station modularly, as the ISS was done, because you don't have to put everything in the first package. The first one will go there. It'll have a lot of capability, enough capability to get itself there for sure. But it won't have ECLSS capability, so environmental control and life support. But the second module, HAB1, will have that capability. It'll launch into a similar orbit. The PPTM will have taken some facilities from the ISS, payload facilities, research racks, etc., and it will detach and fly itself to the HAB1, and at that point, it will become a fully functioning station. And then you can see the other 3 modules, an airlock, HAB2, and then a research and manufacturing module. First, we are anticipating to have PPTM ready to launch by 2027, and HAB1 will probably be a year or so after that. And so we hope that well before the kind of 2030 deadline that we're all working toward, we'll have a viable alternative to the ISS. A second thing we're doing is building a spacesuit, actually 2 spacesuits. One, a lunar spacesuit for the Artemis program, and one, an orbital one to replace the EMU that's been used on the ISS. For so many years. That spacesuit was not designed to be left on orbit. It was designed to go up on the shuttle and come back home and be refurbished on the ground between flights. Obviously, that's not happening these days. And it's getting pretty long in the tooth. Our suit looks pretty much like you would imagine it would be. It's got a few interesting features. It's basically the same suit between the lunar and the orbital version. Really the difference is the boots and some dust protection. And so there's a lot of economies there. Interestingly, NASA has chosen a model that they started with commercial cargo and commercial crew, whereas they're going to buy the EVA capability as a service. So we're not giving them the suit, we're selling them the service. We keep the suit, we keep the IP, which means, of course, like SpaceX has done with the Falcon 9 so successfully, we can use it for commercial purposes. But what I want to talk about today is private astronaut missions. Now, this is really a subset of the first project because as we were getting into the development, we realized that we needed to build a team and the equipment and the procedures and the infrastructure to be able to run a mission in low Earth orbit. And so what better way to do that than to send some astronauts to the ISS? So you can see we've done 4 of them, 1 per year starting in 2022. Each of them had 3 customers. The first ones, which I'll get into in a little bit more, were all private astronauts, meaning they were self-funded. The second one was a combination, 1 self-funded American and 2 government astronauts from Saudi Arabia. The third had an Italian, a Turk, and a Swede. And the fourth, which just happened this summer, had an Indian, a Pole, and a Hungarian. So these 11 or so nations, many of them flew, well, 1 flew for the very first time, Turkey. A couple of them flew for the second time, and more than half of them were the first time that somebody, a citizen of that country, went to the ISS. So we're very proud of that. Obviously, it's an important legacy. So one of the first things that a crew does is design a patch. And as Mark Plansky will tell you, any patch with your name on it is a good patch. I'm showing you these because these are AX1 and AX3 patches, and I'm going to kind of focus my remarks mostly on those 2 missions because those are the ones that I had the most to do with, obviously. Before we started designing the patch, though, we had to get to know each other. So these, as I mentioned, were self-funded astronauts, in other words, billionaires. These are people that can do whatever they want, whenever they want, and they decided to join me on this trip to the Alaskan Talkeetna Range to spend a week in absolute misery. It is an amazing experience to go through something like that, and the bonding that you go through is really a product of how much you suffer together. And I mean that pretty seriously, to be honest. It's, in this particular case, it was cold, it was wet, we had every form of precipitation known to man. And we really did get to know each other pretty well as a crew. And we had spent probably on the order of single handful of hours together before we embarked on this journey. So it was trial by fire. Nobody knew how it was going to work out. And it turned out, I mean, these guys showed up and they really put their noses to the grindstone. I was very pleased and impressed with them. The AX3 version of NOLS was a little bit different. As you can see, the sun is shining. We were in the Pacific Northwest doing some open water kayaking around the San Juan Islands. And we did not suffer, but we bonded anyway. And on this trip, we actually brought a flight surgeon, and we brought our lead flight director, and we brought our mission manager with us. And so that really helped form the team. It also happened a little bit later in the training. So the crew were pretty much bonded already, but this is very useful. In fact, we had invited a NASA flight director to come with us, but the government didn't really think that was a good idea. I'm not sure if they're afraid of something might happen, but anyway, after that, a couple other things that we do are zero-G training. So this is not really training, it's just an experience, right? Everybody knows, I think you get in an airplane that does parabolic flight trajectories for 20 to 25 seconds. You're in free fall, which is exactly the same sensation that you have when you're in space, except instead of lasting 20 seconds, it lasts basically forever. We went from micro-G to macro-G. This is a commercial centrifuge facility near Philadelphia. And in here, we went through the G profile of the launch, the entry and abort, and also the sea state that we might expect after splashdown. So again, another experience. It isn't really anything that you have to learn. You just have to be acquainted with it to have an idea of what it's going to be like when you actually fly. And then we got into sort of the meat of the training. And of course, The meat of the training is the 2 spacecraft that we're going to be living in. One was the Dragon to take us there and back, and then one was the ISS. And so living and working is, of course, how do you sleep, how do you eat, how do you go to the bathroom, that kind of thing. But it's mostly what to do in case of an emergency. So the emergencies that happen in space, the 2 big ones are fire and depressurization. I think the reasons for those are obvious. On the ISS, there's an additional one, which is a toxic atmosphere. We use ammonia to cool the avionics. There is an ammonia to water heat exchanger, which takes the heat away from the avionics and transfers it to the working fluid. And if there should be a rupture or some kind of a leak in that heat exchanger, ammonia can get into the cabin, which is extraordinarily fatal, bad. So we basically train to run to our respective launch vehicles, close the hatch, and then try to purify the atmosphere based on some measurements that we take. But we also do a lot of sort of the day in the life thing, how to use the equipment, the operations tools that we have on board. Most of that stuff is laptop or tablet based, as you can see in some of the photographs. We do a lot of medical training about what to do if one of us becomes incapacitated, even though there are, of course, usually at least a chief medical officer on board the ISS, but one of us is designated as such as well. We also went through some high altitude chamber testing. Again, this is an exposure to hypoxia. I think you would pretty much know if you were losing pressure before you started to feel symptomatic, but it is good to know what those symptoms are. Everybody has slightly different symptoms. It's a little bit like alcohol. Some people are happy, some people are belligerent, and everything in between. And then we did quite a bit of training at SpaceX. So SpaceX, if you haven't been there, it's an amazing facility at Hawthorne. Basically, they bring sheet metal and wire in one end and rockets out the other end. But that's where they do most of the training as well. They have a fully capable simulator. It does not move, but it has flight hardware, flight software in it. And we train in 2 different ways. First of all, the 2 front seaters, I'll call them the commander and the pilot, or in an airplane you think of the captain and the first officer, do a lot of the maneuvering and following the ascent, entry, rendezvous, undocking, etc. profiles from these touch screens, which are magnificent. It's, I've flown from the Soyuz to the shuttle and the Crew Dragon, and the evolution is really quite amazing. The space shuttle, for example, had, I think the number is 1,000 switches literally and spread out all over the cockpit. I don't know exactly how many there are on Dragon, but it's about 10. And you generally never touch them. All the commands are sent via the touch screen. All the information presented is very intuitive. But the second part of the training that we do is with a full crew. And again, that's really the fire and depress case. The worst case, if you will, is you're out of your launch and entry suit and wearing sort of comfortable clothing in the middle of the night, let's say, and you get an alarm for a fire or a depressurization. Sooner or later, you're going to end up in the suit because that's your protection. It's either your protection, it's not so much your protection from a fire. The assumption is that the fire will be extinguished by the onboard systems, but now the atmosphere is contaminated. And so you've got to either purge the atmosphere by diluting it with gas, or in worst case, you could actually depressurize a capsule to get rid of all of that contaminated. And of course, you want to be in your suit when you're doing that. So if you start off on a breathing mask and you have to get in that suit, that's a pretty tricky thing that we need to do a lot of crew coordination to help each other through those processes. So that goes on for the total training is, I'm going to say, about a year. It could be as short as 9 months maybe. That would be pushing it. But at about a month prior to launch, the crew is pretty much trained. We will go down to the Kennedy Space Center and get introduced to our flight vehicle, which you can't really see very well here, but it's on this scaffolding behind us in this image. You get inside, you get that new car smell, it looks just like the simulator, to be honest with you, but there's a little bit of a difference that you sense. They take you through what they call Sounds of Dragon, so they'll play some recordings of some of the things that they don't have in the simulator, so valves moving. They even have, they play all the alarms for you in the real thing instead of the simulator. So It's kind of a gradual getting close to your flight sensations. And then we go into a 2-week quarantine process. In the meantime, the vehicle is being, sort of put together, assembled. As you saw, the capsule goes from being on that scaffolding to here, gets mated to the top of the second stage of the Falcon. Excuse me. The white part is a capsule. The sort of what you see in the back is what they call the trunk. Half of the trunk is covered with solar arrays, which is the side that you see here. And the bottom half is covered with radiators. So basically, when you're not doing something like pointing at the space station because you're going to get there soon, you point to the solar cell side toward the sun all the time, and the radiator side goes to open space, and that's how you chill and power the spacecraft. Then the whole thing gets rolled out horizontally. That final integration occurs in a building that's not very far from Launch Pad 39A. And then it gets sent to the pad, up the hill, and then erected. SpaceX redid the launch tower here. It's some of the same structure, but a lot of it is new. They got rid of the rotating service structure, which was the big door that would close over the space shuttle's payload bay during launch. And then things start getting pretty serious. As I said, we quarantined in a place not exactly on Kennedy Space Center, so we had to transit to get there in a helicopter sometimes, depended on where that location was. But on L-2, 2 days before launch, we would wake up at the launch the same time that we were going to wake up on launch day. We'd eat breakfast. We'd get into whatever vehicle was going to take us to KSC. We'd get suited up. All this stuff on a very precise clock because on launch day, you can't be late. We get out to the launch pad and everybody take a little happy snaps, and this is the orbiter access, I said orbiter. This is the capsule access arm that takes us out to the spacecraft, of course. But when you do it on launch day, things seem a little bit more serious, including our faces. It's pretty exciting when you think about when you walk onto the launch pad and think about the fact that you're not coming back down that elevator, at least you hope not to. You're going to be going into space. And so at about 2 hours and 30 minutes, we start getting in. We have a team of SpaceX. They call themselves ninjas, and they look like it. They're dressed in black. They have black black caps on, and their face is covered mostly with black. So I think that started in COVID, and it looks cool now, so they keep wearing it. They help us get in. They close the hatch. They make sure that it's sealed okay, and then they leave. And then we're sort of left with not a lot to do until about 40 minutes prior to launch. At 35 minutes prior is when they start fueling the rocket, which is very different from the space shuttle. So at 40 minutes, we arm the launch escape system, and it enables a bunch of sensors that if something were to go wrong during the fueling operation, the Super Draco's jets, rocket engines would fire, and you would end up in the ocean just offshore. They've actually tested that with nobody in it, but it looked pretty successful. And so you close your visors, you get all strapped in, and you flip that switch, and then you can see all these various steps that are being called out. And a little bit like on the space shuttle, you would hear at the 9-minute mark, you would hear a poll where they would go around the room, so to speak, and ask everybody if their system was go or no go for launch. We do something similar with all these tick marks that we're going down on a checklist that we can see in front of us, and we can hear being called out by the Falcon 9 operators. The last minute, you are ready to go, of course. We hear the final go for launch, and then the countdown. And I can say that in every launch I've ever been in, the milestones happen when the clock goes from 4 digits to 3 digits, and from 3 to 2, and mostly from 2 to 1. The last 10 seconds of launch are pretty exciting. Like in any spacecraft, you're really not flying very much. You're basically monitoring the systems. In the Dragon, probably less flying than in anything because it's very automated. I would say it's pretty close to Tesla's self-driving capability. But the launch is very smooth. It's liquid engine, so there isn't that rough sensation that you had in the space shuttle. The acceleration, though, just keeps growing and growing and growing. So imagine you're in a Formula One car or maybe a Tesla, and you get on the gas as fast as you can. So that sense of acceleration, it lasts 9 minutes. And by the end of that, you're going 28,000 kilometers or 17,000 miles per hour, and you're at about 200 kilometers altitude. The space station, it's interesting how it works. The space station, think of it as in a constant orbit around the Earth, but the Earth is turning. And the spacecraft, when it's launching, can't really steer left and right very well. It's super inefficient to do that. So you pretty much have to launch when the plane of the orbit passes over the launch site. When that happens, the space station could be right overhead, or it could be on the other side of the Earth. And that sort of difference is called the phase angle that you have to make up for in the oncoming days. And we do that by staying below altitude-wise, because the higher the altitude, the longer the period. So the lower the altitude, you are actually catching up. You're going faster than the space station. So when we close that phase angle, then we finally do the final oh gosh, I got ahead of myself. A little bit of the final proximity operations, where you fly up below and then in front of. And in our case, we docked on top of the space station. So we actually went around and then came down on what they call the minus R bar. We check that the hatches on both sides are not leaking. We open the hatch, and then we come aboard and greet the ISS resident crew who is there. This is Expedition 71. And on this mission, I heard 9 different languages being spoke on the International Space Station. I think that's the I in international. As soon as that's over, everybody gets to work. This is what drives your life when you're on board the space station. This is a multi-day version of a flight plan that tells you basically up to or as little as 5-minute increments what you're going to be doing every minute of the day. Generally, you'll see right after we wake up, the first thing you see is DPC. That stands for Daily Planning Conference. That's where we get in a conference and talk to the control centers around the world, starting with Houston, then we come to Huntsville, then Munich, then Scuba, then Moscow. And then now, to further highlight the award that was presented earlier, we have a Mission Control MCCA at our headquarters in Houston. And so this is a team that has several positions which map somewhat to a flight control room that you might see in Houston. Not as many positions, but we have comp specialist, medical engineer, flight surgeon, research officer, timeline management, stowage and inventory, a ground control officer, and then it's all led by the Axiom operations lead, equivalent to a flight director, who basically pulls the room for any actions that they take, and that message gets up to the crew. So while we're doing these private astronaut missions, of course, all of this is being fed through Houston. So we're not actually talking to the spacecraft, we're talking to JSC, Johnson Space Center, but someday, of course, we will be talking to our own spacecraft. So this is some imagery of some of the experiments that we did. You know, I threw out the number before, about 150 experiments over those 4 missions. These missions look exactly like a NASA, ESA, JAXA, CSA, whatever mission. I mean, these astronauts are up there. Generally, they bring research from their own countries that their agencies have done, usually a call out to the research institutions nationally, and they'll take some subset of that. We'll either bring the stuff with us, or we'll have a preposition on a cargo vehicle that goes up before. And they spend their time, as you can see, a lot of time in the glove box, with plants, I would say most of it, probably the pretty significant majority is human health experiments. Interestingly, when I was flying with NASA, a lot of that was to try to understand how the human body was adapting to microgravity and how we could come up with countermeasures so they could survive longer and longer periods in microgravity. Now, I think the focus is shift on what can we do to make human health on Earth better rather than for astronauts, which is, I think, a logical next step. When it was time to come home, you heard the durations of the missions were 17 days and 21 days respectively. They were supposed to be 10 and 14. What happened is, well, first of all, you have to have a little bit of time to get there. So on the order of a day to get there, on the order of a day to get back. But the landing conditions have to be pretty precise. The SpaceX Dragon comes home under parachute, and so if there's a lot of wind, that means there's a lot of horizontal velocity, and that's bad when you're splashing down. So in the first case, we had to wait more than 4 days before we can undock, and on the second mission, we had to wait quite a while as well. So the team in mission control is obviously assessing that. We actually undocked 48 hours before we splashed down, which meant 48 hours in the capsule. It's not my favorite activity, but it's free space. It's like extra innings baseball for those of you who stayed up last night. Pilot and commander get suited up in their launch and entry suits while still on the ISS. The 2 mission specialists will do so once we close the hatch and get everything buttoned up on the other side. And then I said that you're going about 28,000 kilometers. That's about 8,000 meters per second. And so you take that 8,000 meters and you take off only about 100 meters, so 7,900, and that velocity is no longer enough to sustain you in orbit, but will actually have its perigee, its low point, in the atmosphere. And of course, as soon as that happens, then the drag starts to build up from the resistance of the very thin and then increasingly thicker atmosphere. The G's build up. In the capsules that I've been in, both Soyuz and Dragon, you're up to about 4, maybe 4.5 G's for up to about a minute. Now, they're not airplane G's, so they're not this way. The G vector is this way, so it's pretty tolerable. But after you've been in space for a while, especially 7 months, it feels pretty heavy. Then there's a lot of commotion when the, actually I think I missed a slide here. Yeah, so the undocking happens well before you do the deorbit maneuver that takes off that 100 meters or so per second. But the commotion is when the parachutes come out. There's a couple of pyrotechnics that send out 2 drogue chutes, and then after that, the main chutes come out. The last 1,000 meters, and the main chutes don't fully disreef until about 1,200 meters above. So the last 1,000 meters, they go by relatively quickly, and you're counting them down. Splashdown was relatively smooth. Having landed in a Soyuz, which I described as a series of explosions followed by a car crash. We've all done a belly flop, right? So when you belly flop, it feels like you may as well be, diving onto concrete. But the capsule here, you may or may not be able to see it, but it's at a little bit of an angle. And so it's not landing heat shield flat. It's actually going sort of toe in first. And so it's very smooth. I think you may see in a video I'm about to show that the capsule goes almost underwater, then it comes back up. But within minutes, there's a recovery crew. I mean, the guys are on you like very quickly, and the recovery ship gets to you pretty soon, such that, well, what happens is they back the ship up, and they put this bridle on top of the capsule with an angle frame that reaches over and then picks you up, pulls you up, drops the capsule on the back of the deck, pulls it forward, and they open the hatch and you get out. We had a bet on AX-1 with the leader of the recovery crew. He said that he could have the hatch open 37 minutes after splashdown. So at splashdown, 4 o'clock started on board, of course. And I'm telling you, 36 minutes and 57 seconds, the hatch opened, so we lost the bet. So here it is on the deck. It's about to be pulled forward. This is called Dragon's Nest, as you can imagine. And then they pull forward, and then 4 happy faces. After a short duration mission, people are pretty, you can't really walk straight very well, but you can walk. You're not incapacitated from that aspect. From there, you get heloed off to, depends on where you splash down, of course. The first 3 missions, we splashed down off the coast of Florida, 2 in the Atlantic side, 1 in the Gulf. But the 4th mission and all subsequent missions, both NASA and ours, will be splashing down off of the coast of California. Anyway, they'll take you to the nearest airport, basically, or hospital, and then you go through some medical checks, get on an airplane, back to Houston, and that's the end of the mission. So let me show you a recap video of what I just said, only this one's going to be about our last mission, AX-4. There should be some audio here. We're going to take it from the top here. I know it works because we tested it before. While they're doing that, let me just say that those three countries that I mentioned, India, Poland, and Hungary, had all had astronauts that had flown like 30 to 40 years ago with the Soviets on the Soyuz to the Salyut space stations. And so for this mission, it was the second time that somebody had flown, first in a generation, basically, and the first that any of them had been to the ISS. How are we doing? Ready? Okay, 3, 2, 1, go. There we go.
When I think or feel about having the flag on my left shoulder, I just want Hungarian people to know that we did this. We were able to achieve this. And it completely doesn't matter for me who is in the suit. I am proud, but I just want them to be proud as well.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and lift off.
For 3 nations, a new chapter in space takes flight. Godspeed, AX4.
Welcome, Earthlings, from Great.
It's an amazing feeling to be in orbit for the first time. When I looked out through the window for the first time, the view was just stunning.
Wow, what a ride it was. But when the ride started, it was something. Like, you're getting pushed back into the seat. It was an amazing ride. And then suddenly, nothing. It was an amazing feeling.
We also want to thank you for, basically, thanks for everyone around the world, every person, every team who made this beautiful day happen.
Grace crew, welcome aboard the International Space Station. Peggy, welcome back. It's a great honor and privilege to have such a legendary astronaut on board with us. And Thibaut, Shooks, and Swab, congratulations on your first space flight.
Thank you to all participants. Station, we are now resuming operational audio communications.
I travel to space with the dreams of a billion hearts with me. I want them to live this journey with me because I feel that it is equally theirs as it is mine. Because I feel that this is truly the journey of an entire nation.
And look where we can go when we work together on common platform, common science, then sky is no longer the limit. We can explore space, we can explore science, we can explore technology and build new solutions for the future.
The AX4 crew came here with a purpose and a really busy agenda. This was a great mission and we enjoyed it the most. So now we will return home and we will spread the word in our countries that these things are within our reach. These things are possible even for smaller countries like ours.
It's always great to work with a bunch of professionals, which you are, but it's even more special to work with folks that have become our friends even more deeply. Thank you.
Thank you to the Axiom 4 crew.
And we have splashdown of the AX4 crew back on planet Earth.
Welcome home.
I think it's really important to have these examples of people to show the new young generation that actually there are no boundaries. Your dreams, your careers, and your lives have no limits. This is what you dream of, then you can pursue.
So I should have mentioned those two, Axiom 2 and Axiom 4 missions were commanded by my colleague Peggy Whitson, who's a very extremely decorated former NASA astronaut. Among many records she holds is the most days in space of any American. And it's a privilege to have her on the team. And the third astronaut at Axiom Space is Koichi Wakata, formerly from JAXA, the Japanese Space Exploration Agency. And I hope to get him on a flight coming up soon. So with that, we have about 5 minutes to take some questions. I think that boils down to like 4 questions. Anybody? Go ahead, in the back.
Thank you. So Peggy is totally beast when it comes to getting experimentation done on the space station. She accomplishes her day. She accomplishes the extra task list. She accomplishes anything else that the ground will send up to her to do. How important and pervasive is that culture with the teams that she works with when she does fly 1 and 4?
Well, I can tell you, first of all, when she was at NASA, she definitely had that reputation, and I think she wore out the ground team. They were so happy when she was finally coming home because we have something called the task list, which is basically a job jar of extra stuff. Like if you have time, you might want to do this. And they populate that on Monday, and by Friday it would always be worked out and worked off, so there was nothing left. So yeah, I think that is, and if it isn't obvious, you know, we really don't, I don't want to say we don't like the phrase space tourism, but that's just not what Axiom does. I think space tourism is wonderful, part of the spectrum of commercial human spaceflight, but Axiom does not do that, and our crews are anything but tourists. I mean, they've trained very hard, and when they're up there, as I mentioned before, the missions that they're accomplishing look almost identical to a NASA or any other agency mission. So this concept of professionalism and working hard and making the best use of the time that you're up there is indeed pervasive and important. Coming behind you, sir.
So Michael, you've flown Soyuz, Shuttle, Falcon 9. How would you compare the quality or the comfort, perhaps, of the ride of those different rockets?
Depends on the phase. If you're going for super cramped, Soyuz is your vehicle. If you're going for a smooth landing, Space Shuttle for sure. I think the Space Shuttle launch was a little less comfortable just because of all of the vibration. But again, I'm a little partial to the Dragon just because I feel like it is designed with humans in mind, and it's not a great transit vehicle. Well, it's a great transit vehicle, but it's not a good place to be doing science. It's a good thing to get from point A to point B. It's like your car. You go somewhere on destination, you don't want to sleep in it more than you have to, right? But they're all privileged to have flown in all of them. If I had to pick one to fly again, it would be Dragon. Anything else? Just getting her steps in.
Thank you. You have flown multiple times. I was wondering, does it change a lot from the first time to the others? Do you enjoy the same, or do you enjoy differently? Does it become routine? How's the feeling? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the missions are all different, so it's hard to compare. But I'll say that what I have noticed is that I appreciate each one more and more with every successive one. I think part of that is I have more, I'll say, bandwidth to absorb the experience. I remember my very first shuttle mission, we were driving out to the launch pad, and the crew transport vehicle stopped, and the chief astronaut was about to get off to go get in the T-38 and fly the weather mission, and he says, I want to lead you in the astronaut prayer, which I'd never heard before. So we all joined hands, and he said, please God, don't let me screw this up. And I'll tell you, that is a very strong feeling when you're any member of any cockpit. I mean, that is obviously in your head, but when you're flying on a space shuttle or any vehicle, we've got an enormous group of people behind you, you know, expecting you to perform. There's a lot of pressure on yourself to do well. And I just think that after the more missions you fly, the less you worry about that. I guess the more confidence you have in yourself, and you just become more open to absorbing what it's really all about, and that makes it better. And I mean, the feeling was very much summed up on AX1. I was still in my seat. The other guys were sort of in various stages of getting changed into or getting out of their launch and entry suits. And for the first time, they really looked out the window and saw the Earth. And to hear these like grown-ass men, how much joy it brought them. I'm not sure that on my first mission I would have had the perception to really hear that, but this time I was definitely attuned to that, and yeah, it gets better every time. All right, thank you guys. I appreciate it very much.